Welcome to the LOGSTAT, the Army's premier podcast on all things sustainment, where we analyze new developments, discuss current trends, and forge the path ahead for the next generation of sustainment soldiers. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the LOGSTAT. I'm your host, Captain Garett Pyle. I'm so excited today because we're going to be getting into another fun conversation of base clusters. Now, I've had some good experience when it comes to base clusters in a light formation up when I was in Alaska, but I've never got to experience what it's like on an armor side, on the heavy side. So, and I want to kind of get into that for you today. And with my guest here, Major Bobby Leeman, he's going to kind of walk us through how on the armor side, we're starting to look at how can we take the concept of base clusters that a lot of lighter formations are utilizing right now and adapt it to the heavy formations. Major Leeman over here, he is the SPO of the 703rd BSB down the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team of the 3rd ID down Fort Stewart, Georgia. And I just want to welcome you to the show today, sir.
I appreciate it. So as mentioned, the 703rd SPO and 2 ABCT at Fort Stewart. A little bit about myself, originally from Lewiston, Maine. My Army career started light at 101st, and then my company time, I went to Fort Hood and under 1st Cav, did FSC command there, a couple of years of staff. And then from there, went back to the heavy world and did my KD time as a major at 3ID, where I am, started at division as the DTO and now working as the SPO.
So you got a little bit of both sides. You got some of the light side, now you got the heavy side experience. So kind of helps you make you more well-rounded. And then before we fully get into this conversation of base clusters, can you tell us more about what your experience has been like as a SPO and Armored Brigade Combat Team?
Yeah, so the SPO, just to back it up, like when you go to the SPO working with maneuver guys, a lot of people don't know what SPO is. It's very interesting just to explain as the maneuver side what SPO is. Usually what I like to put it to them is it's almost like an S3 of sustainment. I don't realize, like, under the SPO, how many commodity sections we have, from everything from ammunition, fuel, of course, a big one, maintenance, transportation, mortuary affairs. There's a lot that falls under the SPO. So it brings me to the next point. It's very demanding and challenging, but both very rewarding at the same time, because you can see the decisions that made within the SPO directly affect the ABCT, and especially in the field or tactically, how the ABCT survives is all in those decisions of the SPO. In order, do we make the right decisions for fuel, ammo? Does it go to the right battalions? It all falls within the SPO. So my time in 2 ABCT, very challenging, even garrison and tactical. There's a lot that goes on. There's a lot to capture within the SPO and an ABCT.
So what are some good advice when it comes to being successful as a SPO?
Yeah, I think the first one is, since you work with a lot of different sections, and then with the ABCT, it's relationships and synchronized with the maneuver S3, just the maneuver battalion. So that's one thing you'll see probably throughout this interview is how important it is to be synchronized as sustainment in the maneuver plan. So my first advice is to build that relationship with the battalion XOs, battalion 3s, and of course the brigade 3 and brigade XO, to ensure that the sustainment is synchronized with the maneuver forces.
Nice. Yeah, it's one of the things, as you're being a logistician, it's like, okay, got to go to be a SPO. It's like, especially as you make that transition from company grade to field grade, it's like that thing out in the distance, like, oh no, It's coming for me.
Yeah, it definitely can be very daunting, just to think of how much now your responsibility is. Some believe you start, of course, the FSC as a company commander. You're the smaller, you can call it SPO, the FSC for battalion, but now, wow, this is the whole brigade. You have much more commodity sections under you, and you're now supporting right at 500-600 people in a battalion. Now you're supporting 4,000 to 5,000 in a brigade, and your decisions, as mentioned, really can affect the brigade, whether they're going to be successful or not.
Exactly. So then, you've had experience on the light side, as we mentioned. So what's the difference between supporting a light unit compared to a heavy unit?
Yeah, so definitely a little experience 101st, and the first thing I'll just point out is the consumption rates. So when I say the consumption rates for your sustainment, you can break it down by your class of supply. Just to start with the first one, it's pretty obvious, but class 3, so your fuel. With the fuel, obviously tanks, Bradleys.
I mean, what do you mean? But they need fuel. I mean, I thought they just need a little bit. Aren't they? They're very fuel efficient.
Yeah, yeah. No, so like, yeah, bring up that point. It's just the yes, the fuel tanks are pretty large tank, roughly like 400 gallons. But how many gallons per hour they burn, considered to light with this as JLTV or now the ISVs, is tremendous difference. It's a lot. So the consumption rates for class 3 and how that really affects is the planning. Because it goes all the way backwards, the correct planning and how that fuel with correct run estimates, forecasting, and then how you implement your distribution plan to get that fuel forward. Whereas in a light world, you can get away with not having the correct plan a few days and your whole brigade's not going to culminate. You miss one day of resupply from the CSSB or forward from just the BSA, you're going to culminate within 1 to 2 days. So it's very crucial.
Well, you shut down the entire operation.
Exactly.
And if the tanks aren't moving forward, they're out of fuel, and you're done.
Correct. Yeah. So that class 3, and that's just one. And the other two would bring up. The next one's class 5, is the ammunition. Very similar to fuel is with class 5. Much heavier usage of class 5. So tanks, 120 millimeter rounds. Paladins you support to with the FA battalion. And then a lot more 25 mic with the Bradleys. And it's not simple with the planning where soldiers can just pick up 120 rounds, 155 rounds. It really takes planning MHE to have these at your different logistic release points for resupply. You can't, like I said, just have a soldier pick up. You don't have the correct MHE there to cross-load these from other battalions. You're not going to get that resupply forward. And then as like the fuel, you're going to eventually culminate if you don't have any ammo to fend off the enemy.
Okay. So when it comes to sustainment planning, like how does that usually normally operate in an ABCT?
Yeah, so first, just for the sustainment plan, it starts with at the brigade level to have the BSB integrated with the battalion 3 in their plan. So as typical in the MDMP starts, you want to receive the order, but what's really critical is once that order is published at the sustainment side, is concurrently planning the same as the 3 to start the run estimates. If we are not concurrently planning with the brigade 3, we're going to be behind and it's going to be too late. And why that matters is because we have to let them know, is their maneuver plan feasible? So as the SPO team with all the commodity sections, it's really forecasting and breaking down all of the classes of supply and allowing the brigade to know, all right, this is how much fuel, this is how much ammo it's going to need, and they can build their plan off of the sustainment, ensuring that it's feasible for the maneuver plan. And one TTP that we like to do, and 2 ABCT that we've implemented, is to have a LNO from the BSB within the brigade S3. So they understand the maneuver plan, and they're able to give that information to the BSB planners. And I say that because we'll get into more of the clusters. Our SPO team is not co-located with the Brigade 3 tactically. They're 2 separate locations, roughly anywhere from like 10 to 12 kilometers apart. So for us to be succinct, that LNO is very critical part of the planning process. That's just like at the brigade level. And then once that information is fed from that LNO, the BSB has its own planning with the commodity shops, like as mentioned. They're doing the running estimates, they're forecasting all the classes supply. It's very critical for us to know the forecast to tell the brigade commander, not just for those 24 hours, next 48 hours. Like we're planning as a SPO, not just FUOPs, we're doing CUOPs. It's a little bit of everything. So it makes it a little more challenging that we're part of the entire planning phase and also CUOPs section. So enough touch points with the Brigade S3, then ultimately, once our run estimates are done in our planning phase, we brief the BSB commander and allow him to make the final decision as he's the sustainment coordinator for the brigades. And he makes that ultimate decision, like this is when the BSB is going to jump, this is how we're going to fight it, the sustainment fight's going to work.
Okay. Now, a lot of those are audience out there, especially at the company level or the captain rank. You know, they're hearing you talk about commodities, writing estimates, and their mind goes right back to Captain's Career Course, going through and doing their ICOS, individual concept of support. So what is that like doing a concept of support as a SPO on your level?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because there's definitely something I had in my notes that I talked about, and we just implemented. We just got back from LTP
Okay.
at Fort Irwin, and what we created, it's not nothing new. We call it the logbook. Really, essentially, what it is an ICOS for the maneuver plan. So it's just a simple PowerPoint slides for each commodity, and we just have a run-in estimate of it. Basically, it's a concept of support for that phase. So the first phase, once we receive the order from the brigade, that first phase, every commodity, if you're a commodity section leader, so a transportation captain and his team, he has a one slide that gives the breakdown. All right, this is our COLT report. This is what all the lift assets we have available. This is what we're able to move within this phase. And it's every commodity has that analysis done so they can take that. We can discuss it, bring it to the BSB commander, and then ultimately we take that information and we brief the brigade commander. Hey, sir, this is where we stand when we do our war syncs, which is kind of like our war game, and we have all that information to let the brigade commander know, yes, this is how we can fight, or no, we need to relook this because we don't have enough ammo, sir. We're not getting our next resupply from the CSSB at this time. We cannot do that.
And I was just saying the word ICOS, I think we just gave some people out there nightmares.
Yes.
Hit the word, they go, oh man, don't want to go back to that day again.
Yeah, it can be challenging, but it's very critical because without doing that, we all know there's things out there that can give you the average consumption rates and things like that. But like our team, we really try to focus on, for that phase, this is how much fuel and ammo. And one easy thing we like to, like I tell the maneuver forces, is to remember 35 Mike. So for 35 would be fuel and ammo, and then the Mike is your maintenance and medical. Those four things are essential for an ABCT. If we don't have those four things figured out, good chance that the brigade will not be successful in their operation.
So how do you tie in the maneuver side when you're doing like your concept support rehearsals and those drills?
Yes. So with the maneuver plan, like I said, it first starts with the LNO. The first thing we have is the statement, because normally there is a brigade planner within the brigade that's usually in an unfilled position. So we ensure that there's at least a rep from the BSB, either from the SPO or the 3. At the end of the day, they're all triple C, the captains, or if they're post KD, or not post KD, the post triple C, they've been to triple C, they have an idea of how the concept of support works. So it starts with the LNO, and then from there, we like to do syncs. So of course, we get it to later, there's multiple log syncs that we do, but even before that, we have daily syncs with the battalion 3 staff. So either with the CUOPs or FUOPs, to have those daily syncs to understand what they're thinking, what their plan is, and what the sustainment side is doing.
Okay. So as we continue to, get, build up to our conversation for base clusters, can you walk us through what is distributed logistics, and how that ties into the ABCT fight?
Yeah, definitely. So for an ABCT, just start off thinking about the maneuver plan is very distributed. So on the battlefield, so the simple thing when we think distributed, we're going to have maneuver battalions across the battlefield. And so I think one way on how I don't think this is what we're doing, what I think is the best idea is to distribute our logistics. So basically spreading both our capabilities and our supplies across different distributed supply nodes in order to, one, survivability, and then flexibility to have those different nodes support those maneuver forces that are spread out throughout the battlefield. For example, like we know the Cav squadron is going to be out in a screen further ahead. If we have a supply node that is either to the west or the east that's further out, it's easier to resupply that squadron.
Now, with it set up like that, are you still able to conduct like precision sustainment out there, getting it out there?
Yeah, it takes a lot of planning, of course.
Yeah.
It's just not simple, but yeah, there's a couple different methods, and I think the one way is, for one of our sustainment nodes we'll get into, is like the flea of the fleb, is to have a task and purpose. So right, it can change, of course, definitely on the BSB commander's decision, but this whole task and purpose is to provide so-and-so logistics to this battalion. And that sustainment node is going to have a certain amount of commodities just to supply that. But it's what I want everyone to know is they can change mission and to supply another battalion. It's very key as the BSB. Yes, we have FSCs that support their maneuver forces, but ultimately they're there to help out the brigade. So we need to make that call. Oh no, now, yes, I get you're the FSC for the Cav Squadron, but the infantry battalion is in dire need of class 5. We're going to change your mission to help out the infantry battalion.
That's definitely a unique conversation right there. I know it's always goes back and forth, the best way to use the FSCs, who really owns the FSCs. I know that can get into
Yes.
Sometimes we'll say a heated conversation over that concept, but it's good. But I like how you brought that up. Hey, yes, you belong to this battalion over here, but this other one needs you, and they're right next door, needs you to go out there and support them. And that's where your roles as the SPO really comes into play, is helping manage those assets across the battlefield for support.
A big thing we see is Rural 1. All right, if Rural 1 exceeds the capacity, all right, look, who's that next Rural 1? What battalion is now that the one battalion where they exceeded their Rural 1 capability? Where do they go next? So to predetermine that, like during our rehearsals, we already know, like, okay, this is where this armor battalion is going to be. The infantry battalion now needs that support. They already know where the Rural 1s is. Another one is that comes up a lot is recovery. So the big thing is for an armored, we didn't talk about it, one of the big differences as well for ABCT and the IBCTs is maintenance. And recovery is a big part about that. So with that being said is, all right, they might have exceeded their recovery assets. So we know this battalion can now support with their recovery assets to this other battalion.
So do you feel then, is there a more efficient way to, I would say, manage logistics in ABCT?
Yes. So I think the concept now is the base clusters. So I think that kind of leads us thinking about the base cluster and how to be more efficient. And there's multiple ways. I think kind of with the distributed logistics conversation is how we can be flexible, but also the biggest thing is to be efficient is survivability. In today's now contested operational environment, as we've seen from lessons learned in Russia and Ukraine war, is sustainment nodes are being attacked because that can cut off the resupply for the maneuver forces. So with the base clusters, this really can allow us to help ourselves be more survivable and also flexible to the maneuver forces.
Yeah, because I mean, in years gone by, we were just operating out of a giant forward operating base and pretty much built ourselves a fortress around there. We were like, we're fine. We don't need to worry about anything. But in the next fight, as we're seeing now in large-scale combat operations, that's not the case. One, we're a high-value target now, which recent example has shown if you can take out their supply lines, then the combat forces are null and void if they have nothing to fight with. So we're now that high-value target, and it gets after. We need to be able to support, have that survivability, have that flexibility, be very mobile, be able to conceal ourselves as best we can, which is kind of hard sometimes, especially I know as we're going to get into with the ABCT, it's kind of really hard to conceal that.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a lot of fuelers.
Yeah, well, just in the BSB, the 90,000 gallons of fuel, which is equal to about 18 fuelers and trims, or in the light, that's nothing compared to the light world, just the amount, and that's just fuel. That many vehicles just for fuel, just in the BSB, not including the FSC's fuel assets.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about some base clusters concepts before in the LOGSTAT here. It's what's nice is because we're still working through this. The recent FM40, it's starting to talk more about that on how we should enact base clusters and like what does it look like, especially for sustainment units. I've had some experience in Alaska with it. That was light, and we were just trying to figure out, okay, do we break apart Alpha and Bravo completely? Do we make a hybrid company? And I know one of my other conversations we had was, well, what happens if we would just change the entire MTO and every company would be a hybrid? And then that could really solve some of our problems. Because say you break up a company, it's like, okay, now I'm working with these soldiers I never had worked with before. There's causes issues. So there's a lot that we can get into on this conversation today. And my point is to see how you're envisioning, because I know the armor side, they're still planning it out.
Yes.
Just like everybody else. Is what are you all starting to see as ways to put base clusters, take it from concept to action?
Yes. So and no, like when I say this, there's multiple ways to do this. So this is just one way and getting after the whys. But for the brigade, for 703rd right now, we do the two base concept with a potential third base cluster concept. So just going to break down the clusters. So the first cluster is what we call is the pole cluster. It's roughly anywhere between 1 to 5 kilometers from the other cluster, what I'll call is the push cluster. It's really dependent on that TCI. That's the biggest thing. That can change a couple of CPXs we've gone through. Depends on the mission. Sometimes the brigade commander would like the push cluster more forward with a more up-tempo maneuver plan. But the pole cluster, what we have for the composition of pole cluster, it starts with, I'll just go over how we break down the C2. So the pole cluster has an operations OIC, which is the BSB XO, and they also have an operations NCOIC, which is the S3. This allows them just to focus on the operations side of the cluster. And then within the C2, we have a base commander, which is a company commander. For this, it's the HHC BSB company commander, and the first sergeant is the base commander. You can call it the NCOIC. What they're really focused on is the security of the node and then the field feeding. So that does not tie up the battalion XO in field feeding security. His job is to obviously help out the BSB make decisions, but to focus on the operations side of that pole cluster. Then within that pole cluster, like I said, the BSB's staff is there minus the SPO. So the XO has the entire 3 there, the 1, the 2, they're within that pole cluster. Within the companies in the pole cluster, it's a hybrid. So we do not, for these clusters, we're not company organic to the push and pull cluster. It's a hybrid of multiple companies within both the BSB and then the FSCs, FTCPs, also broken up into both clusters. So in the pole cluster, we're starting with the HHC and 703rd, it's the majority of your staff. The staff, battalion commander, battalion sergeant major are in the pole cluster. And then moving on to Alpha Company, which is the distribution company, which has some large sustainment platoons within them in sections. The SSA. So you talk the SSA, it could be a whole episode on the SSA. There's
a whole episode of just the space it takes up.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, but just to go over the conversation, not in actually what the operation of the SSA is. We talk about the SSA's castle, which is the class 9 parts to support the brigade. What we do is we have identified 18 critical BOHs, which is our containers that contain the class 9 parts.
Just still a lot right there.
Yeah, 18 of those, but what's key is the best is how do we conceal those so we don't just line up 9x9 containers, because the whole thing with the clusters is to ensure that the enemy cannot pick out, oh, this is the BSA. So we try to do the best is with some deception techniques is to separate even these supply assets throughout the clusters to break it up so they can't easily pick up. That's SSA. There's those 18 containers. So within that cluster, they're broken up, they're concealed, so they can't just pick out and hit the SSA.
I thought just all I had to do was throw a camo net on and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
That's check the box, I'm concealed.
Yeah. If it was that easy, it would make our lives 10 times easier. But within the pole cluster, you have the SSA that's there, the majority of their personnel with the biggest things that like we mentioned, the castles. Then also within Alpha Company, of course, they have plenty of lift assets and the fuelers. For right now is we roughly 50% would be at both clusters. So they're broken up to 50% will be at the pole cluster. Then of course the other one would be at the push cluster. Within another big part of the pole cluster is the Charlie Company. So our role 2, Charlie Company, the medical company within the brigade. So one thing is contention, just to bring up a lot of people, you get to think about the time distance from role 1 to role 2, where that cluster goes. We just got to consider we're not too far from the battalion's role 1, so those patients do not die of their wounds. We decrease that time. And then the last company we talked about, Charlie, who's Bravo, so our maintenance company. They're heavily more going to be in the push cluster. They're going to have about 30% of their assets in the push cluster just to break up their signatures. So they'll have recovery assets there. They'll have maintainers there at the push cluster, enough to maintain that cluster. The last thing I did not mention about the pull cluster is there is a MAP-P in there, the modular ammo transfer point, within the brigade. So we have 2 MAP-Ps, one at push and one at pull, and the purpose for them being at the pull cluster is the ammo for the course of personnel there, but also for the battalion's FTCPs that are at the push cluster. So those 2 FTCPs that are at the pull cluster is the engineer battalion and the field artillery battalion, as they're more in the rear of the brigade. So they're the rear. So both of those FTCPs are within the pull cluster.
Okay. That's what it's like for everyone out there. It's, we're hearing a different perspective. That's the whole point of having this professional dialogue, is understanding, hey, this is how this unit is working through and developing a concept of base clusters. Like this first I've seen where it's 2, the pull and the push, and just seeing how you're able to be able to utilize that going forward. And I know, as with everybody out there, you're gonna just trial and error. You're gonna go out there, you're gonna train on something, you're gonna come back, okay, this is what worked, this is what didn't. How can we refine this? And that's why we got to keep having these conversations to see, because there's probably people out there that's never heard of doing it like you're describing it. Now they're gonna be like, okay, how can we take that and adapt that for our formation now? How can we train with this? Yes. And doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Correct.
And then,
just want a little bit with the push side. So the push cluster, heavily, so the operations OIC is the SPO, would be myself, and then the N2IC would be the master sergeant that falls. It's the SPO N2IC. Then the base commander is the Bravo Company commander, and the Bravo Company commander first sergeant. And as mentioned, Alpha Company, it's about 50-50 split between the pull clusters, so I'll have about 50% of their assets. And what's important about that is one of these clusters did get hit by the enemy. We don't lose all of our liquid logistics at one cluster. So they're separated, just how I mentioned, like the castle, their BOHs are separated throughout those clusters. We're not all going to have all our fuelers, even though within that one cluster, together. It's going to be separated throughout the cluster for Alpha Company. Then the majority of the maintenance team, there's a lot of, unlike the IBCTs, we have some more unique sections within our maintenance company. All of those unique sections, like our NGATs that works on our electrical components within our Bradleys and tanks, they're within the push cluster, along with the armament section, the service and recovery section. That's in the push cluster for the maintenance company. And then Charlie Company does have a small element, not the Roll 2, but they do have some medics and some evac treatment platforms, which we use as the armored platforms, and a couple FLAs, wheeled medical platforms as well, in the push cluster to push forward. But the key thing is the pull and push cluster, they can change. So if we needed to change the liquid logistics to 60%, 70% more in the push, the BSB commander has got, of course, that authority to see what fits, depends on the maneuver plan and Met TCI.
Would you see them, especially as you move forward, leapfrogging then? Is that how you would envision that?
So one thing, and that I think that leads into the potential option for our mobile node, or a lot of people we can call it like a forward logistical base, FLEE. We like to use multiple names for very similar sustainment nodes, but
of course.
So leapfrog, one thing is in that third node, it depends on the maneuver plan. So a couple of reasons we'd use that third base cluster if there's a mission, maneuver mission or operation that's needed. So for example, the ABCT, we do a lot of breaches. So we'll send a mobile node, a FLEE forward, to support, again, a task and purpose for that node would be support the breach, not just at the breach, but also to ensure there's enough sustainment for the exploitation force through the breach. So they kind of have 2 purposes there. But to your question about the leapfrog, yes, 100%, that one of those nodes would then could potentially fall into where that FLEE is. And then what that allows, one node still to be operational, because the mission doesn't stop. Like there's tactical pause. There's no pauses. You can go to the defense. You can change different phases. But to your point, is we have one of these clusters is still able to support the maneuver plan. We don't, logistics doesn't stop. Our sustainment does not stop throughout the fight.
So then, with that separate, creating these base clusters, we're not one giant fob. So of course, one of the, I want to say cons, but one of the risk assumptions of risk people have to do now is personnel for security.
Yes.
So how do you envision that with, doing security operations in a base cluster? Now we're, especially if we go to a 3 base cluster or even a 4, you have less personnel. How do you envision that for your team?
So the security, there's a lot to unfold there, but yes, for the security, starts with identifying like that NCOIC for that company is in charge of that security cluster. And before that, really the rehearsals we've talked about, like they already know, we know a good idea of what companies are within that cluster. It already has that security plan. Like, all right, this we get into the back of the push cluster, the remaining FTCPs from the 2 armored battalions, the cavalry squadron, and then the infantry battalion. Their FTCPs are also that push cluster. But that security, that NCOIC who's in charge of the security, they already know like that section. We already got it drawn out on our range cards we like to do. They have their designated areas. That being said, it makes it harder because a lot of these the FTCP personnel, so the district platoons, they're gone on mission a lot. So that brings some issues. But to have a plan is to really focus on the strong points. What I like to do is we do have strong points that at all times they will have some type of security. But the days of having the triples.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up.
We cannot. It takes too much time because we want to be mobile too. Like we're anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. We're looking at 72 hours. We're looking to displace to a new location because at that 72 hours, most likely the enemy has identified our position for the security. But another thing is we are definitely going to implement in our upcoming rotation to the National Training Center is deception. So a couple of things, we can have some battle positions, like you can leave some battle positions out there with vehicles that might not be manned, that still will present to the enemy a challenge. And I know like previously you've talked like some tech things. We also are working some counter UAS systems to protect ourselves as well.
Okay. Now, like, there's always a concept out there, the work rest cycle. Especially, and then when it comes to base clusters, as we mentioned, with lack of personnel, it comes even more. What are your opinions or thoughts on the 12-hour versus like an 8-hour out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna depend on how many personnel you have. So ideal world, I didn't mention it, but I'm always trying to ask the Brigade 3 is we'd love to have some type of a platoon, a maneuver platoon, either an armored or an infantry platoon to come secure us to help out with that. But most likely it's probably not going to happen. An MP company would be great too, a whole MP company to help us. But to that 12, most likely, it's going to most likely be 12 hours just because of the personnel you have. But as mentioned earlier too, is these personnel that are securing these base clusters, they're your maintainers, they're your supporters. So they're on mission, conducting resupply missions. The maintainers are either doing recovery missions or fixing vehicles. Like we don't have right now in the BSP, there's not a dedicated security element to just provide security to these clusters. So it's a challenge, but it's depending on the personnel, it's like 12-hour shifts.
Yeah, you bring up 2 great points, and who knows if the Army will ever do it, but I think adding just a small platoon of infantry, or you said MPs,
yes,
to a BSP, I think to a BSP headquarters as a specialized platoon, I think that would be amazing because there, when you have, it helps with your base security as well as helping with convoy operations for convoy support.
100%.
Who knows if that ever happened, but I think that'd be something that be really nice because years gone by, when I went to NTC as an assistant unit, like they called us. I was down in Fort Hood, Texas, under the 13th ESC. And then it was 4th ID was going to NTC, like, hey, we need a platoon to come do support for us.
100%.
So there was me, brand new 2nd lieutenant, going out there with my platoon. But it was nice because they had an MP, I don't remember if it was a platoon or a company attached to the CSSB. And they would provide security for all the convoys. And that just worked out. That was very efficient because they were especially for us, because we had not done that yet. They ran out with us, so that provided that element for us. And then a second point you brought up is, of course, with the 12 hours, is if you are limited on personnel, the way a lot of people show me the 8-hour shift is you have your 8 hours of doing your job, you have 8 hours of doing base security, and then you have 8 hours of recovery. So it kind of keeps you rotating through and keeps people, everybody gets a piece of the pie then when it comes to base security then.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's going there and having a plan. You gotta have that plan. This whole, we'll have a sergeant or guard, all that will fall under that company commander and the first sergeant in charge of that base defense. And then we'll probably get into it later, but it's key is those rehearsals and people, they know what their task and purpose is, what they're doing out there. When, like, as you mentioned, when you're not maintaining this security, they know that. Because if we don't survive, as mentioned before, the BSB, the cluster, then the brigade does not survive. We will culminate within probably a day after the BSB, BSB being taken out.
And so get on your point of like rehearsals, and this takes more sets and reps when it comes to training. Is okay, this is my job. We're gonna have to break this base cluster down. This is my role for that part. Can you kind of walk us through some concepts your team is thinking through on how to do that training and rehearsals for everyone knows their task and purpose?
Yes, there's a few things. The first thing before even going out to the field doing it is we've started to implement it is we call it a TOOT. I know the Army loves our acronyms. We just throw out things for different purposes, but tactical exercise without troops is we did it in our brigade gym. Is we took not just the company FSC commanders, but the platoon sergeants, the platoon leaders, and we did a walkthrough. We literally did a walkthrough. We talked by starting at each cluster first to be everyone could understand the clusters. And the hardest part is like, who's at all these clusters? Because you don't work with, like we talked about, these FTCPs from other battalions. You're not working with them every day. You don't know who these people are, like the relationships, how you manage that. But the first part, the rehearsal, is just a walkthrough. We set up a map on the gym. We made a train model just on the gym floor, and we walked through. This is each base cluster, and this is how we're going to move this place. So literally, they need to know prior to go out to the field what is theirs and what is their mission. But when does that happen? Like, it's having an X check. We're not there yet. Of course, SOPs. We're working on that from our last few field problems. But in that SOP or X check, so all right, platoon sergeant, for a reason they're not here, they're not there. All right, squad leader, you're in charge. They should know as a squad leader, but also you got that X check and SOP to follow. Like, I know, all right, Bravo company on the recovery, I follow Charlie Med. They'll know in sequence to having that X check in our brigade. That's a big thing in our normal sustained rehearsals in our brigade cars. Is X checks is a big thing in 2 ABCT.
We've done something similar. I know we did a lot of, especially when I was the HHC commander, was talk X is just bring everything out, set it up, see how we're going to be dispersed between the different base clusters. And I know that was a good train exercise because it was like, hey, let's operate out of the talk too. Like, it's do battalion operations for this week out of the talk. Yeah, we're out in the motor pool or just outside the battalion headquarters, but it gets people in that mindset. Okay, when I'm out in the field or I'm out there doing actual operations, this is what I have to work with, and I know this is my station. This is what I had to set up. This is what I need to bring with me. Just by doing little stuff like that.
Of course, it's repetitions after repetitions. In the ABCT world and most units under the Western Hemisphere, we're busy. There's no question about that. There's a lot going on, but deliberately making sure that's on the brigade's calendar, it happens, and get more repetitions. There doesn't need to be a whole field training to do it out in the field. Like we just mentioned, you can do it in garrison, go on the football field. We did it in the basketball court, and just to get repetitions.
Yeah, and you can just set up, like, just have it where, hey, this is what this base cluster is going to look like for this week. Hey, you're going to operate out of this motor pool, or hey, you can go operate out of your installation's football field. Just little reps like that is going to help you, so you're not sitting out there going out to the train your first FTS going, okay, what are we doing right now? And everyone, like, get it done while you're in garrison. Utilize your time like that. And we've talked about the security piece, talked about some of the work rest cycles, the way that your team is envisioning this base cluster to look. So with this separation and distance, command and control is going to be critical. Like that's the area we haven't touched on yet. How do you envision you're going to operate across these distances with these base clusters?
Yes, that's Yes, it's true. It's a challenge. Like, there's no question. Mentioned before, just for the personnel, designating who that operations C2 is within myself at one, and then the BSB XO at the other one. But that's just there, like how we talk about first, like communicating. We'll just start with the brigade. I'll mention it because I think it's very, very critical having that LNO from the BSB that feeds the information to the BSB. So we're making decisions concurrently with the brigade, so we're not behind. But within the clusters, it's difficult. Like, there's no question. One thing is what we worked on. We do is deliberately we didn't get into detail on talking about it, but I know this has been conversations within our formation is the S3 and the SPO to ensure they're synced within the BSB. We talked about the brigade, but the S3 and the SPO synced because they're at two different clusters. And but every captain, they know, they've been to Triple C, so they know, like, all right, there's a BSB captain and a SPO captain. They both know a constant support. They can be interchangeable. So with having that, like, I don't think there's a need for us right now. We haven't seen it. Maybe it'll change in a few months to have an S3 within the SPO. But what we do is we have daily syncs. Like, as soon as, of course, we have the log sync. In addition to log sync, the battalion 3 will either be in person or we do distributed log syncs through MS Teams. They will be there with the majority of the BSB staff to understand during the log sync. But after that, we also sync up with the battalion 3 section to ensure that everything that came out of log sync is put in order and they're understanding everything that we are planning. Because that's crucial. Like, the SPO is, like we mentioned, they're doing the run estimates. They're coming up with the sustainment plan. That happens in the SPO. The BSB S3 could be totally out of the loop. He's not there. So if we don't have those deliberate syncs within the S3, the BSB commander is not going to know because he's at a different cluster. But that's more is in person, the syncs, having the C2 at each cluster. But then definitely a whole nother conversation, but we'll work on is the actual communications piece. So fortunately, being a TIC 2.0 brigade, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of upgrades when it comes to communication. And our BSB S6 and Brigade S6 have done a wonderful job of implementing these new communication systems. But what's key is I want to bring out, not to deep dive too much into the technical piece of some of these communication system, is the PACE plan. Having a PACE plan that everybody understands, that you've rehearsed before, that you have those systems and you can actually work those systems to be able to communicate. So the biggest one we use right now, it's MMCS, the old JBCP, to ensure that almost every platform has that, so they can speak. When we're mobile, you still have the capability to you'll have your talk within the CP, but also, like, when we move, you can still communicate within your tactical vehicle. We ensure that down to the lower TI, they have that capability. But one thing is, we worked a lot with the S6 is the sustainment PACE plan is sometimes different, and it's fine. It should be a little different than the overall brigade PACE plan. But it's key that everybody understands that PACE plan. They know where to submit their LOGSTAT. They know if MMCS is down, like, okay, is it going to be on MS Teams? We have VSATs, we have Scouts, different sustainment platforms that the maneuver battalions don't have. But, well, the maneuver battalions have it under their sustainment units. So to incorporate all of our sustainment communication systems to allow us to communicate within the sustainment world of a brigade.
So how do you see, base clusters changing the way that we do sustainment planning then? Because especially after, all this about command and control, because it is a lot, and how we're going to manage that. Security is going to be a big thing, being dispersed across the battlefield. So how is that going to really change the way we conduct our sustainment planning now?
Yeah, so it's going to change it a little bit. I think at the brigade level, it's not going to change the MDMP with the LNO. That part, and I brought up a few times now, because you can see I think it's very essential to ensure that the LNO is tied in with the brigade plans. If we aren't tied in with the brigade plans, we're going to be behind, and it's going to be a rough time.
So then for everyone, I guess the the biggest takeaway then from this episode, L&O.
Oh no, that's one thing. Yeah. To have that plan, it's the big picture that's distinct with the maneuver plan. That's the big part about that. But for how it's going to change, it's more in the BSB plan level, because now in the normal BSA cluster, the SPO is with the BSB staff and the commander. Ultimately, as mentioned, the BSB commander makes the sustainment decisions that ultimately he gets approval from the brigade commander, but it needs to be worked out, syncs with the BSB commander and the SPO staff in their MDMP process to inform the BSB commander what the sustainment plan is, and this is what we forecast. So managing how that looks, and as mentioned, of how we do it is the SPO is difficult because you're working the MDMP at the brigade level, but you're also at the battalion level as well, because there's a lot of the same plan. The SPO really comes up with the BSB COA, course of action, like that really comes from the SPO. From there is we brief the BSB commander, but how does that fit in that MDMP? We're not co-located with them. Okay. So it's a challenge, but how we do it, we deliberately have it on our battle rhythm. We put if you don't have it on the schedule, it's going to be tough to fit it in and ensure that it happens. So managing that battle rhythm and ensuring that it's on the battle rhythm to have those touch points.
Yeah, if it's not there, it's in reality it's probably not going to happen.
Correct.
Or if it's going to happen, it's going to be rushed. So we could probably talk 3 years in a day when it comes with base clusters and just all these new developments. We've had a lot of great topics so far today on walking the audience through sustainment in an Armored Brigade combat team, and then how your team is envisioning a base cluster. And it just reminds everybody, like, units are crossing over now. We're trying to figure this out. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations. So is there anything that we missed today when it comes to either sustainment in Armored Brigade combat team or base clusters overall that we missed that you wanted to highlight?
There's a lot that can be deep dived. I think it's just well known. Like a lot of these things that we hit on, it's very broad. There's a lot of deep dive conversations where you could probably have multiple episodes on a lot of these things. Maintenance by sun, you break up maintenance. But what's key, I just want everybody to know this is one way. There's not a one way answer. This is how base clusters need to work. And it's very key to have what we're developing right now. We don't have it right now. It's like a playbook. So you have options that's rehearsed, like, all right, this is option one. This is we're going to do the 2 base clusters. And then option 2 is, okay, we need to push out a flee. There's in your playbook. And then you already have, like, okay, what does that flee look like? We've already had that made up. We've done it a few times now. Like, okay, this is 3 fuelers with trims. This is a UBL for this many tanks, this many Bradleys. This is our maintenance plan. This is what goes into this package. But to have that plan, to of course rehearse it, it's essential for you to be successful when you actually fight as a brigade.
Exactly. And it kind of goes into, like you said, about having all these drills and everything. It's the more you do these steps and reps, the better you're going to be. Like, we go back to like base trains, like, hey, we got to do battle drill 1 alpha. It's the same concept here. These base clusters is you develop a variety of different plans. You said the playbook, okay, it's all dependent on, we could say the cop-out answer is Met TC dependent, but it's so true. So many instances, even though it's just the given word for everything. But okay, get up there. It's, hey, the train's not going to be favorable to this base concept. The first one in our playbook. It's going to work for maybe the third one, depending on how many you develop. And you got to always be aware that you can change. And sometimes people get very restrictive, like, hey, this is the way we do it. We got to do like that. No, you got to be adaptive.
Yeah, I think one thing to add to that too is you need to understand your brigade commander's the way he fights. So we understand our brigade commander. He's the up tempo, very fast. We like to get to the objective quick. He likes to get out to the objectives. So to understand that, you can play around. You have your own playbook that's tailored to your brigade. But understanding your brigade commander's intent, and then how does he fight?
Yeah. And you always got to know what your higher headquarters is thinking and doing, because as sustainers, like, we got to follow their direction or lead.
100% forecasting.
Yep.
As mentioned, like we have to forecast, really be concurrently planning with them and be ahead of them. So, like, all right, this is the anticipation of what they need.
Which will get us into the whole concept of predictive logistics and precision sustainment, which is a whole other topic. We've talked about it a lot of time on this podcast, but that gets into that whole, go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Just with that is just be familiar with whatever uplog planner, whatever best you're comfortable with to forecast your sustainment, and use that until you get to the fancy technical sides of forecasting. But just use what you're familiar with and what you're best to use.
Exactly. So as we close out today's episode, I always ask all my guests, what is some good advice for the sustainment community from all your years of wisdom?
Yeah. You've probably heard a lot, but the one thing is, for sustainment side, the first thing I just want to say is we're here to support the force. So, like, we might not have all the answers, not be able to support, but we'll find the way to support. So, like, obviously never say no. We find a way to make it happen, whether that's putting them in the right direction or figuring out ourselves. But, like, as a sustainment unit or being in the sustainment community, we got to ensure that we find that support, we make it happen. The other thing, the number two, is just the relationships you build. Definitely in the sustainment community, there are going to be a lot of different maneuver units, sustainment. You don't want to burn bridges. You want to ensure that those relationships you build are strong, because you're going to run into somebody, but also it's going to help you down the road. Like, you're going to see somebody, like, they're going to remember that time when you hooked them out and you were there to support them. People definitely will remember that.
Always. And have your L&O, as you said.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just succinct with the maneuver, but units for sure.
Awesome. So where can people reach out to you? Because there's always some good follow-up questions. There's probably somebody out there in the audience right now going, okay, I'm in a heavy unit as well. We're about to do this, to be able to reach out to you so you guys can coordinate and just have that collaboration.
Yeah, for sure. There's one thing is, definitely don't hesitate to hit me up. Definitely on Global. You can look my name. My first name's Robert.M.Leeman. No numbers on the email. You'll find me on Global. But as said, don't hesitate, especially going through a year in the SPO. Plenty of products to help some struggling future SPOs, or even company commanders out there. Like, there's a lot of knowledge out there that I could definitely help you with and put you in the right direction at minimum.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, sir, for taking the time to meet with me today, be able to come up here and just kind of walking us through the concept of base clusters, and really, helping us kick off this concept of sustainment in an armor brigade combat team. So truly thank you for your wisdom in the conversation today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. And I hope for some of the listeners out there, hopefully it was helpful. And like I said, if there's anything you guys are struggling with or need help, please hit me up. But no, thank you again, Captain Pyle. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir. So there you have it. We're continuing this conversation, understanding how do we get through this continuous transformation. Units across the Army right now are going through a variety of different changes, either with formations or equipment, new technologies, and really testing out new methods on how to fight for large-scale combat operations. And as you heard from today's conversation, we got into it as understanding what sustainment looks like in an Armor Brigade combat team, as well as how is this unit here, the 703rd, looking to adapt base clusters into the formations so that they can continue this fight and learn from each other. So I highly implore you, reach out to those who are experimenting with base clusters, seeing how they're doing it. Reach out to those who have already done it, and just get into the regulation. Like, there's concepts the Army's already developed on how a base cluster should look. But at the end of the day, as we talked about today, it's MET-TC dependent. I know we always say that term, but the enemy always has a vote. So get out there. When you're doing your sets and reps, just try different things. See what works and doesn't work, and then write about it. I always keep telling you to tell your story so that the rest of the Army can learn from you, your mistakes and your successes. So get out there, tell your story, write an article to any of the journals, specifically the Army Sustainment Professional Bulletin. I'm here to help you through the writing process, as well as reach out to me, be able to get you on the podcast, be able to tell your story on how you're executing base clusters. But that is all we had today, folks. As always, sustainment leaders start here. See you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the LOGSTAT. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Please share this episode across your formation and leave us a review. If you have a topic you'd like here discussed, then please reach out to us at armysustainment@army.mil or directly to me on Global at garett.h.pyle. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the U.S. Army CASCOM page. We'll see you next time. Sustainment leaders, start here.